Hello, everyone. So, we all know that natural disasters are terrifying, right? The thought of losing everything in a flash flood, hurricane, or earthquake is just scary. We're told FEMA is there to help, to pick up the pieces when our lives are shattered. But is it there are just too many stories and whispers about things not being right? Like, what's really going on with FEMA? Are they really there to help us? Or is there something darker lurking beneath the surface? In this video, we're going deep. We're diving headfirst into the dark underbelly of FEMA, uncovering the secrets they don't want you to know. We're talking tainted food, missing money, and other significant concerns. Get ready because this is going to be wild. Okay, so let's start with Hurricane Katrina in 2005. This was a major turning point, a moment when the world saw the devastating consequences of a natural disaster colliding with a broken system. Thousands of people were displaced, left with nothing but the clothes on their backs. FEMA swooped in, promising aid, promising hope, but what happened next is just chilling. Reports started surfacing about FEMA distributing food that was, get this, rotten. Like literally expired, moldy, inedible. People were already desperate, starving, and then they're given food that could make them sick. It's like something out of a dystopian nightmare, and it gets worse. Remember those FEMA trailers? The ones provided as temporary housing for those who lost their homes? Well, it turns out many of these trailers were riddled with formaldehyde, a toxic chemical. People were living in these trailers, breathing in this poison, completely unaware of the danger. We're talking about serious health problems, guys, respiratory issues, skin rashes, even cancer. The really messed up part? FEMA knew about the formaldehyde. They had tested the trailers, they had the results, and they still allowed families, children, to live in these toxic boxes. How could they do that? How could they prioritize cost-cutting over human lives? It's heartbreaking, infuriating, and it makes you wonder, what else are they hiding? So, we've got tainted food, toxic trailers, but hold on, it gets even shadier. Imagine this, you've just survived a natural disaster. You've lost your home, your belongings, maybe even loved ones. You're emotionally drained, financially ruined, and then, bam, you get a letter from FEMA. But it's not a letter of support, no, it's a debt notice. That's right, FEMA demanding repayment for aid received. It happened after Hurricane Katrina, after Sandy, after Harvey. Thousands of survivors, already struggling to rebuild their lives, slapped with these unexpected debts. We're talking about thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, the audacity is just mind-blowing. It's like they're profiting off people's misery. And the worst part? Many of these debts were based on errors, on FEMA's own mistakes. They overpaid, they duplicated payments, and then they turned around and demanded that money back from people who were already struggling to survive. It's like they view disaster victims as walking ATMs, easy targets to squeeze money out of. And for what? Where's all this money going? It's certainly not going back into helping people, that's for sure. It just feels so wrong, so exploitative. Okay, so we've talked about the dangers, the debts, but let's talk about the disparities because FEMA's response to disasters often feels biased. Like, have you ever noticed how certain communities seem to get help faster, get more resources while others are left behind? It's a disturbing pattern that's been documented time and time again. Minority communities, low-income neighborhoods, they often bear the brunt of natural disasters, yet they receive the least amount of aid from FEMA. Think about it. After Hurricane Katrina, it was predominantly black neighborhoods in New Orleans that were devastated, and they were the ones who waited the longest for help, who received the least support. Why is that? Is it incompetence? Is it a lack of resources? Or is it something more sinister, something more systemic? It's hard not to see a pattern here, a pattern of neglect, of discrimination, that leaves vulnerable communities even more vulnerable in the wake of disaster. Imagine this, you've just survived a hurricane, your house is gone, your belongings are scattered, and you're trying to piece together what's left of your life. You need help, fast. You turn to FEMA, but instead of finding a lifeline, you're met with a bureaucratic nightmare. The application process is like navigating a labyrinth blindfolded. It's long, it's confusing, and it's often impossible to complete in the aftermath of a disaster. Think about it, power outages, damaged infrastructure, lost documents. People are literally trying to apply for aid while standing in the ruins of their lives. And if you do manage to navigate the online portal, which many people can't access after a disaster, you're bombarded with questions, with requests for documentation that you may have lost in the storm. It's like they're intentionally making it difficult, impossible even, to get the help you need. And the worst part, if you make a mistake, if you miss a deadline, your application could be denied. So not only are you dealing with the trauma of the disaster itself, but you're also burdened with this overwhelming anxiety, this fear that you'll be denied help because of a technicality, because of FEMA's own convoluted system. Okay, so we've talked about the failures, the disparities, but let's talk about the root of the problem, money, or rather the lack of it. See, FEMA is chronically underfunded. Year after year, they're given less money, their budget is slashed, and then we're surprised when they're ill-equipped to handle major disasters. It's like setting them up to fail, then pointing the finger when things inevitably go wrong. Think about it. Disaster preparedness, response, recovery, these things cost money, a lot of money. But instead of investing in FEMA, in ensuring they have the resources to effectively help people, they're constantly being squeezed, their budget treated like an afterthought. And then there are the whispers, the rumors of funds being mismanaged, misallocated, even disappearing altogether. Where's all that money going? It's certainly not going towards helping disaster victims, that's for sure. It's almost as if there's a deliberate attempt to weaken FEMA to make them ineffective, so that when disaster strikes, they're unable to provide adequate support. It's a thought that keeps me up at night, the idea that the very organization that's supposed to protect us is being deliberately sabotaged from within. Okay, so let's say you've managed to jump through all the hoops, filled out the endless paperwork, and your FEMA application is approved. You might think finally some relief, but here's the catch. FEMA aid is often slow, insufficient, and arrives when it's almost too late. We're talking about people waiting weeks, months even, for assistance. Weeks living in shelters, in cars, in tents, desperate for help that never seems to come. And when the aid does arrive, it's often a fraction of what's needed. Think about it, FEMA assistance is capped. So even if your home is completely destroyed, your losses far exceed the maximum payout, you're on your own. It's a cold, hard reality that leaves countless disaster victims struggling to rebuild their lives, to recover from losses that they're simply not equipped to handle. And then there's the issue of contractors, many of whom swoop in after disasters, promising quick fixes, easy solutions. But these contractors are often unlicensed, unregulated, and they prey on vulnerable homeowners, taking their money and running. It's a vicious cycle of exploitation, and FEMA, with their slow response and inadequate aid, only makes it worse. Okay guys, buckle up because this is where things get really weird. We've talked about the failures, the inequalities, but now let's talk about the downright creepy stuff, the things that make you question everything you thought you knew about FEMA. Let's start with the coffins. Yeah, you heard that right, coffins. After Hurricane Katrina, there were reports of FEMA stockpiling thousands of plastic coffins in Georgia. Thousands. Why? What were they expecting? The official explanation was that they were preparing for mass casualties, which, okay, makes sense on the surface. But then, you dig a little deeper, and you start to find all these conspiracy theories, these dark whispers about FEMA camps, about government plans for mass detention during emergencies. And suddenly those coffins take on a whole new meaning. And it's not just the coffins. There are rumors of FEMA purchasing guillotines, of stockpiling body bags, all these unsettling signs that point to a darker purpose, a hidden agenda that's, well, terrifying. Now, I'm not saying I believe all of this, but I am saying that it's strange, it's unsettling, and it raises a lot of questions about what FEMA is really up to. Are they just being extra cautious, or are they preparing for something we don't want to think about? Okay, so we've talked about the dark side, the conspiracies, but let's bring it back to reality for a second. Because even if you ignore all the creepy stuff, there's still a very real, very pressing issue facing FEMA staffing. See, FEMA is severely understaffed, like critically understaffed. They simply don't have enough people to handle the sheer volume of disasters they're facing, let alone respond effectively. Think about it. Every year, there are more and more natural disasters, more and more people in need of help. But FEMA's workforce isn't growing at the same rate. In fact, they've been struggling to fill positions to retain experienced personnel. Why? Well, for starters, the work is incredibly demanding, often traumatic, and the pay isn't exactly competitive. Who wants to risk their lives, sacrifice their mental health for a job that doesn't even pay the bills? So you've got a shrinking workforce, a growing workload, and a system that's already strained to its breaking point. It's a recipe for disaster, literally. And it means that when the next hurricane hits, the next earthquake strikes, FEMA will be even less prepared than they were for the last one. Wow, guys, that was a lot. I told you it was going to be intense. What are your thoughts on all of this? Do you believe FEMA is doing the best they can, or is there something darker at play? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you found it eye-opening and subscribe to my channel for more deep dives into the unknown. And hey, if you've had any personal experiences with FEMA, good or bad, share them in the comments too. Stay safe out there, guys, and stay informed. Because knowledge is power, and in a world where things are getting crazier by the day, we need all the power we can get.